Hey everybody, and welcome back for another deep dive into A Course in Miracles.
Yeah, it's great to be back with you.
We were just talking about Lesson 12 yesterday.
Right, all about those illusions.
And how recognizing illusions as illusions helps us to see the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited about Lesson 13 because it just takes that idea even deeper.
It does, yeah.
So it's talking about the fear that we associate with meaninglessness.
Yeah.
And how that can kind of trap us in the illusion.
Yeah.
But before we even get into that, let's just hear the lesson itself.
Let's do it.
A meaningless world engenders fear. Today's idea is really another form of the preceding one, except that it is more specific as to the emotion aroused. Actually, a meaningless world is impossible. Nothing without meaning exists. However, it does not follow that you will not perceive something that has no meaning. On the contrary, you will be particularly likely to think you do perceive it. Recognition of meaninglessness arouses intense anxiety in all the separated ones. It represents to them a situation in which God and the ego challenge each other as to whose meaning is to be written in the empty space which meaninglessness provides. The ego rushes in frantically to establish its own ideas there, fearful that the void may otherwise be used to demonstrate its own impotence and unreality. And on this alone it is correct. It is essential, therefore, that you learn to recognize the meaningless and accept it without fear. If you are fearful, it is certain that you will endow the world with attributes that it does not possess and crowd it with images that do not exist. To the ego, illusions are safety devices, as they must also be to you who equate yourself with the ego. The exercises for today, which should be done about 3 or 4 times for not more than a minute or so at most each time, are to be practiced in a somewhat different way from the preceding ones. With eyes closed, repeat today's idea to yourself. Then open your eyes and look about you slowly, saying, I am looking at a meaningless world. Repeat this statement to yourself as you look about. Then close your eyes and conclude with, a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I am in competition with God. You may find it difficult to avoid resistance, in one form or another, to this concluding statement. Whatever form such resistance may take, tell yourself that you are really afraid of such a thought because of the vengeance of the enemy. You're not expected to believe the statement at this point, and will probably try to dismiss it as preposterous. Note carefully, however, any signs of covert fear which it may arouse. This is our first attempt at stating an overt cause and effect relationship of a kind which you are very inexperienced in recognizing. Do not dwell on the concluding statement, and try not even to think of it except during the exercise periods. That will suffice at present.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's saying that a meaningless world is impossible.
Right.
But we perceive things as meaningless.
Yeah, like how does that work?
I know.
Oh, it's paradox.
So if nothing is truly meaningless,
right.
Why do we even experience it that way?
Well, it's that ego.
Okay.
It all comes back to that ego.
Okay.
And this lesson is really talking about that.
Okay.
What is the ego's role in all of this?
Yeah.
In this perception of meaninglessness. And you know the ego. It thrives on fear.
Yeah.
And separation.
Right.
And so a truly meaningless world would be a world without an ego.
Yeah.
It would be a world where those illusions that the ego has of control,
yeah,
they just wouldn't work. They would have no power.
So the ego sees meaninglessness as a threat.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like it's this big, scary, empty space that it needs to fill with all its own stuff.
That's what can be in control.
It's got to be in control. It needs to put its own narratives and its own judgments on things.
Got it.
So it can feel like it has a handle on things.
Yeah.
Like imagine someone who just always has to be right.
Yeah, right.
They have to have an opinion about everything.
Right.
And then they come across a situation where it's just like, no, their opinion doesn't even matter.
Right.
Like there is no right or wrong.
Yeah.
What happens to them?
They probably freak out.
They freak out. They get anxious because
it's meaningless.
It's meaningless, and it challenges their whole understanding of how they see the world.
That is a really good analogy.
Yeah.
So the fear that we feel of the meaningless is really the ego's fear.
Exactly.
Is not really ours.
Yeah.
Because the Course tells us we're not our egos.
Right.
We're extensions of God. Love.
Love. Yeah.
And in that love,
yeah,
there's just no need to grasp for meaning.
Right.
Because meaning is just there.
It's inherent.
It's inherent, yeah.
Yeah.
But when we identify as that ego, we take on its fears as our own. So the lesson encourages us to recognize meaninglessness.
Yeah.
But without fear.
Without fear. Right. How do we do that?
Well, it can be unsettling.
It is unsettling.
But the Course gives us a practice to help us.
Mhm.
It talks about mindfulness.
Okay.
And it suggests this exercise
Okay.
where you look around and you say,
Yeah.
I'm looking at a meaningless world.
Wow.
So it's not about like denying meaning.
Okay.
It's really about separating ourselves
Got it.
from that ego that's just like freaking out, trying to control everything and make meaning.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're detaching from that need
Okay.
to impose our own meaning.
So if we acknowledge that possibility of meaninglessness,
Yeah,
then we can actually see beyond the ego
that's it.
and that limited perspective.
We make space for something else
Yeah.
to come through.
So let me give you an example.
Okay.
Imagine you're going through a creative block.
Yeah.
You know you're trying to write something
Uh-huh.
or paint or draw, whatever it is. Mm-hmm.
And nothing is coming.
Yeah.
And it just feels
Like blah, blah,
meaningless.
meaningless.
Yeah.
And so the ego would say, oh, this is a failure.
Total failure.
I'm not good at this.
It's not good at this.
This is pointless.
Give up.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you could just detach from that fear and just observe?
Just observe.
Maybe this block is part of the process.
Maybe.
You know, maybe it's like a necessary stage
It could be.
so that something new can come through.
Right, like the quiet before the storm.
Yeah.
It's gathering energy.
Yeah. That's a really helpful way to reframe things.
Yeah.
So the lesson also talks about this vengeance
Uh-huh.
of the enemy
Yeah.
when it's talking about this resistance.
Yeah.
That we have to accepting meaninglessness.
Mhm.
And that sounds really intense.
It does. It's kind of cryptic.
But what does that even mean?
Well, you know, they're talking about the enemy as like our ego,
Okay.
and vengeance is that fear.
Yeah. That pops up when we start questioning the ego.
Oh.
So when we start questioning its authority,
Got it.
you know, and remember,
Yeah.
the ego thinks it's in competition with God.
Right.
It's vying for control.
It wants to be in control.
Yeah.
So the ego sees God's inherent meaning as a threat.
Yeah, like, uh-oh, if I recognize that God has meaning everywhere,
Yeah.
then what happens to me?
Then my illusions crumble.
The jig is up.
Right.
All right.
So this lesson is really challenging us
It is.
to examine how we see meaning. Like, where do you think meaning comes from?
Yeah.
Does it come from our need to control?
Right.
Or is it something much deeper?
That's the question, isn't it?
And so it's saying it's not about control.
No.
It's something that's connected to God.
Mm-hmm.
So from everyone listening, I would love for you to consider this. What areas in your life
Yeah.
do you feel are just really charged with meaning?
Yeah.
Like, where are you assigning meaning? That maybe is just coming from that ego,
From that need to control.
from that need to control.
Yeah.
What would happen if you just let go of that
What would happen?
and opened yourself up to a deeper meaning?
To a deeper meaning.
Yeah.
That's something to think about.
Keep exploring these ideas, and we'll be back tomorrow for another deep dive.
See you then.
I woke up to a miracle today.